Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Useless Aggression podcast. I am James, and joining me as usual is
Your useless aggression podcast world champion, Henry. I still haven't had my belt, by the way. Coronavirus has delayed the coronation of the one true champion of the podcast.
indeed it has. That's the one good thing that's come out of all of this. Firstly, once again, I hope all of you are safe at home listening to this. And also, I apologise if I sound a bit fluey, so to speak. I am unfortunately under the weather and am in isolation at the minute, which has been. Do you know what? It's actually been all right for me. Just going to put out, like, I feel like I've been training to be in isolation my entire life. I've got computer games, I've got films. When we were buying food before we went into isolation, obviously we've got alcohol. Uh, I've got access to your network, Henry. So I'm kind of set up to stay indoors for 14 days, and it suits me quite well.
I always joked about this. Yeah, I always used to be like, oh, I've got so much stuff on Netflix and like Prime and the network to watch that I could take about 3 months off work and then not have to, and I could just watch that and it would be amazing. And then now I'm looking at the potential of taking 3 months off work, and I'm just like, I don't actually want to sit here and just spend the entire time watching Netflix or the network or Amazon Prime. The weather's so good at the moment as well. I mean, down here, the weather is so good.
The weather is, I mean, the one bit of salvation we had is we were able to climb out of a bedroom window in our flat we live in, and the sun was perfectly hitting the roof of our downstairs neighbours, but they got really angry, and we can't do that anymore, sadly. So that's happened. But obviously, I realise other people might not be having as much fun in self isolation. I'm quite fortunate where I can, when I'm done with my 14 days, I can go back to work because my work is still running, and that will probably be a nice break. But I hope everyone at home is doing all right, and we have got a plan that we're going to record uh, quite a few of these. I mean, we'll probably try and come up with some specials because there's not a lot as much to talk about in the world of wrestling at the minute, but hopefully that can provide some entertainment to people at home if they are stuck in isolation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you've seen already, they've like the WWE, they've recorded up until Raw and SmackDown after Mania now. They're a couple weeks ahead. At the time of recording, they are a couple weeks ahead, and I'm not sure what's going to happen beyond then, though, because apparently, rumor has it Orlando is going into complete and utter lockdown, which is why they've been like desperately recording matches. Like WrestleMania apparently got all recorded last week, or most of it got recorded last week, and some of this week. Because yeah, apparently Orlando's going into like total shutdown.
We'll discuss definitely in more detail WrestleMania, obviously, in this episode. The rumours are, well, it's pretty strongly indicated they have recorded all of it now. I mean, it looks as though WWE are going to have to go on a brief hiatus, but I actually don't think that's necessarily bad.
Yeah, I mean, you get so many injuries, don't you? It's about time in a way.
And it'll be quite refreshing. The thing I never like about after Mania is sometimes it's great when they come out and everyone starts a new feud. You're like, this is good. But when you get the feuds that are still lingering from WrestleMania, I never really enjoy that. Like sometimes on Raw after Mania, you'll get a rematch of a match that took place the night before, and you're like, well, why? WrestleMania should almost be the clean slate from there, and then you start afresh with all your new feuds for the new wrestling calendar year. Um, it, so it might be quite nice for them to have a little bit of hiatus and then bring everyone back, and you can start anew as such. So it could work well. It could be terrible. Uh, you know, Vince McMahon sometimes manages to make the worst out of a best situation. So we'll
I,
see what
I
happens
I sort
there.
of admire his commitment to trying to doing literally everything he can to keep it going. Like I really do admire that. But equally, like you've had, as we'll get onto on in a minute as well, you've had a good few people either voluntarily or for medical reasons have to pull out of WrestleMania. And there's people like Roman Reigns, for example. Obviously, his unfortunate health history. People like that. You got to think at the end of the day, you are putting so many people in danger, especially when it's
Oh
on
yeah.
top of like a ladder match with coronavirus lingering around the place. It's just like, oh my god.
Well, when you say obviously yeah, he's very determined to keep going, but obviously for him there's a financial aspect to it, and I know he's not going to want to take a loss, but at some point you have, as you said, you can't social distance when you're wrestling. So I mean, everywhere is, if you're operating still, you have to employ social distancing. You can't do that when you're wrestling. So yeah, as you said, you are putting your health of your employees on the line essentially. So uh, that's why it looks like, yeah, I think they're going to have to kind of call a hiatus. It looks as though AEW are going to be delaying their Double or Nothing pay per view again. I think that's the right move. They've had to get rid of their blood and guts match for the time being, which was gutting because it was going to be amazing. But again, I think it'll be so much better when they actually bring it back properly. Then, when there's crowds again and whatnot. Um, but I mean, if we go back, because since the last podcast we did, it was announced now that obviously Gronkowski was going to be the host. We'll not talk about his terrible dancing, and
Or
then
Mojo Rawley.
oh god, yeah, and they're obviously doing WrestleMania this year now across 2 days. What are your thoughts on that? Because we've been to a WrestleMania when it was on one day, and we've both came out of it saying it was very long.
Yeah, like so we went to 34 for the people that haven't listened previously, but you should go back and listen to them. They're really good. But and I was actually funny enough before we recorded this, I was saying looking back at I watched that quite recently and like looking back at it, if you watch a couple matches and then leave it and then watch a couple matches and then come back to it, you actually sat there like this was a really, really good WrestleMania. Um, but equally at the time you left it and you were just there like by I can't remember the second. I think the second to last match was I think it was Alexa Bliss and Nia Jax or something like that, the penultimate match. And by that point, you were just sat there like, I just need this show to end. Like I'm so done. Like,
I think the penultimate match was it not Nicholas and
oh yeah, it
Strowman?
was. Sorry, yeah, it was Nicholas and Strowman.
Because that's
Yeah,
why. Because then in the Reigns and Lesnar main event, the fans were all chanting,
we
"We want
want Nicholas.
Nicholas."
Yeah, yeah, and the
Yeah,
beach ball and all that stuff. But they are long. The other thing, the thing that I thought was a little bit frustrating with it is when I thought it's been over 2 nights, I was like, they're still going to have a couple of matches, say like 12 matches, and then it will be maybe 3, 4 hours, which is like the old school WrestleManias were about 3, 4 hours. You're like 3, 4 hours a night. But now we're looking at what potentially 15, maybe 16 matches, and like, that's gonna be a long time, again, that's still gonna be a long some of them are gonna be big enough matches, they have to be long matches, like, I can imagine
yeah.
matches like Edge and Randy Orton's gonna go on for a long time, and
I've thought the exact same thing, and so I'm not surprised WWE made this move though, because I've read before in the past. Obviously, New Japan moved Wrestle Kingdom across 2 days, um, and supposedly Vince was like, "Oh, that's an amazing idea. We should do that for WrestleMania." But the issue always was about, they've got the stadium already booked, and they can't then go, "Oh, can we do it across 2 days?" and the ticket sales and etc. So this was perfect for him in a way. When they were then like, well, we're going to have to do it from the performance center with no audience. It's like, well, this is the perfect time to do a WrestleMania across 2 days, and then going forward now they can have that be the structure. And if they did it that each day was 3 hours long, I'd be so on board with that because, as you said, it's a good length for a wrestling show. Look at your NXT takeovers; they're 2.5 to 3 hours in length. Like one of those back to back, fine, because it works well. The audience keeps their energy the whole way through. But yeah, they've just fallen into the same trap. He's added stupid matches to the card. Like, does anyone really care about Aleister Black versus Bobby
where has
Lashley?
that come from? Like, I think I messaged
Yeah,
you when that was announced, and I was just like, literally, where has that come from? Like, there
yeah.
is
You've got the Street
no
Profits
history there.
versus Andrade and Garza. Like, why has that been announced? They're just adding matches for the sake of adding matches. Even Elias versus King Corbin was at best going to be a pre-show match, and you could cut some stuff off this and have two normal length shows, but we're going to have Vince in his classic, classic Vince way. It's just going to, rather than now have WrestleMania be too long across one day, it's going to be too long across 2 days.
'Cause the other thing I don't understand, the other thing that I kind of think is a missed opportunity here as well is obviously, I mean, obviously it's being filmed, or I think it's obviously been filmed, but it's being shown the week after Mania on NXT of some of their takeover matches. And I was like, what you could have easily done here, especially with Ripley and Charlotte Flair already on the card, is you could have had just a couple of NXT matches to fill it up instead. And I would have had no problems with that whatsoever. Like, if the show's going to be long, but you've got matches like, I don't know, like Gargano versus Ciampa and stuff like that, I'd be like, It's long, but with great matches." But instead, it's just gonna be long with I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm fully on the Otis Ziggler storyline, but, like, matches like that, where it's a bit just like, this doesn't need to be a WrestleMania match, this could be a Raw SmackDown match, this could be, like, any other
Yeah,
pay-per-view match, it doesn't need
and the
to be
thing
a
there is
WrestleMania.
that match so depends on the crowd. If that
That's
match
it,
turns
yeah.
into Mandy Rose eventually deciding to pick Otis over Dolph, you need that. You wanted 80,000 people losing their minds to it because that's why this storyline was so good. The crowd was so invested in it, and they're not there. And I think this is the danger with a long show with no crowd. We've not experienced this yet. We've had, even the Raws and the Smackdowns at the minute feel awkward to watch for that long amount of time. And even there, they have to show old matches to fill. On one of the was it on a Raw or a SmackDown? I can't remember which one it was. They showed the entire men's Royal Rumble match.
Yeah, and they showed the women's elimination chamber as well, didn't they, I think, in one of them?
Yeah, they showed the tag team elimination chamber one.
Oh, was it? Sorry, yeah, the
They
tag team one,
shown
yeah.
they showed Lesnar versus Cena versus Rollins from Royal Rumble a few years ago on
Good
one of
match,
them.
though. Good match.
A very good match, yeah.
But, like,
It,
the thing I'm
it's
thinking as well, because it's inevitably gonna happen. I'm not sure what match it is, but it's inevitably gonna happen. If you look back at most WrestleManias in the last few years, there's always been a match, sometimes possibly 2 matches, which has been, like, a minute long, maybe, like, 3 minutes long. Like, you had, like, Samoa Joe last year. The year before, you had that, tag match with the Bludgeon Brothers and Usos and New Day, which was, like, 3 minutes long or something ridiculous like that. And you always get 1 or 2 matches which are just, like, a couple minutes long, and you almost sit there like, "Why is this even on the card?" And you almost know that's gonna happen again as well, and it will be something really stupid. It will be, like, probably Elias and King Corbin or something like that, which is a match that should never have been on the card anyway. And you'll just be sat there like, "I've just wasted 10 minutes of WrestleMania to put this." Like,
I mean, technically, you look at it. I mean, with the two championship matches, Goldberg can't go longer than 10 minutes anyway, and um, I
neither does
don't think
Lesnar, yeah,
Lesnar's going to have a
normally.
long match. He's probably going to have 15 minutes maybe. So they won't be long matches. Taker
I
probably
reckon
won't
that
go that long.
match will actually be brilliant, the McIntyre Lesnar match.
Yeah, they'll just
The
beat the
more I
crap out
think
of each
about that
other.
Lesnar-McIntyre match, the more I'm like, "It's gonna be brilliant." Because like, Lesnar as well, it's no secret that if he likes people, he kind of digs out a bit more. And so apparently I was watching this, interview with Drew McIntyre the other day, and that whole thing on Raw where, like, Lesnar turns his back and then turns around and gets claymored, and then McIntyre claymores him again on the stage and all this stuff. Apparently all of that was Lesnar's idea. And when they're like facing off with each other in the middle of the ring, Lesnar's like, "Yeah, do it. It'd be really good. It'd be really good." And you can just about catch him saying like, "Do it" or something like that. And the whole thing is Lesnar's idea. And Lesnar apparently is a really big fan of Drew McIntyre. And I think as a result, like I actually really like Brock Lesnar. I think, yeah, he's kind of suffers from classic WWE like couple move syndrome. But equally, again, if he wants to have a good match, he has some amazing match. Like his match with Bryan was great. His match with Styles was great. Like if he wants to have a good match and he likes people, he will put on an amazing match. And from the sounds of things, he's got quite a lot of time for Drew McIntyre.
I actually love Brock Lesnar. When I look at it in terms of the domination that he's had, firstly, it's believable. It's realistic. Like because he went to UFC and became a champion there, and obviously just look at him. He's
And
an
he is
absolute tank.
huge. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but then I kind of love the fact that um, he, yeah, as you said, sometimes he has bad matches, but sometimes you need that to establish someone being a dominating force. And the heat that generates, like people, when you then get those moments, like Drew McIntyre, they turned him into a face for like 2 weeks before the Royal Rumble, but it was kind of like okay, like people were a bit like on him, and then he claymores Brock Lesnar out of the Royal Rumble, and he's a star.
And that pop is huge. Is that it's like the biggest pop of the night.
And that is the power that Brock Lesnar has, is that when then you have someone comes up to take him on, they become a star, and it, that's the power that they've created because they have made him so dominant. And yeah, that means sometimes we're going to have crap matches where he beats Kofi Kingston in 10 seconds, or he beats
Ricochet,
Ricochet
yeah.
with nothing at all. But and it pisses me off when that happens, but the payoff is good when it does come in, and I think that I agree. I think McIntyre and him will have a great match. Um, one negative that we kind of said might happen when Gronkowski came. I'm going to bring it back to Gronkowski. Is now unfortunately Mojo Rawley for some reason is back on our screens.
And he's brought back that hype gimmick as well, like the one that was
Yeah,
never a good gimmick in the first place, and he's now brought it
no,
back, and it's like, no.
and it's strange that they dropped that gimmick because it was shit, and then Gronkowski's come back and they've decided to give both of them that gimmick, even though they know it's shit. I'm really surprised that's the gimmick they've gone with for Gronkowski. Like he could have come and been like, "Look, I'm a fucking amazing NFL player. I'm a bit badass," and be a bit of a party boy. But he's just it is weird. I'm not sure I like it.
I think it's yeah, I mean, I do think I mean, his dancing was hilariously bad. You haven't watched it, any of you go and watch it. It's, peak Vince, I would say, and, but I just think it's one of those things where if you like, is if we watched that and there was a live crowd there, I don't honestly don't know how they would have reacted. Like, you might have been like initial
Yeah,
cheer 'cause it's like, "Oh, it's Rob Gronkowski, this guy is like a actually an NFL legend." But then after that, they're probably just gonna be like, "This is kind of like weird to watch." Like, it was very Gronkowski being Gronkowski, which is, cool, but equally, I don't know. I
just a
just
bit
think
weird, right?
I feel like there's no like sort of like trajectory for this character. You look at it and you go like, "Oh, this is a cool character. This guy could be like a mid-card champion in a couple of months, or this guy could be a tag." They'll probably end up getting tag titles at some point, just because they can, and it's like the ESPN headline writes itself and all this stuff. But like, apart from that, it's not like a sort of character that comes out like so. Bobby Lashley, when he came out, you remember when he came out at WrestleMania 30, the Raw after WrestleMania 34. I mean, since
Yeah,
then they've not done a lot with him, but he came out, was huge, battered someone in like a couple of seconds, power the little like power slam thing he does, and then walked off. And you're like, that's how you build someone as a credible title contender. And obviously, what followed was pretty rubbish. But like, that's how you build people, not what they did with Gronkowski.
yeah, I completely agree. I just think again it could be something to do with a crowd. Because for me, what I would have maybe done is bring him out and then have him, you know, do a move on Mojo Rawley because the crowd don't like Mojo Rawley. So if they were there, they would then cheer for Gronk even more. But I guess in an empty arena, that would have just come across very heelish and maybe not have worked. It's just strange because he signed like a 3-year contract, but as you said, like with that gimmick, you're like, well, you're going to end up like if this wasn't Rob Gronkowski, if this was just another random guy they brought in, and he had that gimmick, I'd imagine within 2 or 3 weeks he wouldn't be on the main card anymore, and he'd end up just being in weird backstage segments with No Way Jose. Like there was no longevity
Hey,
to
No
it,
Way
as you
Jose
said.
is a legend. Don't you dare. Don't you dare diss No Way
So
Jose.
yeah, yeah, it just didn't land. Maybe it's because of the empty arena. One highlight I've got to point out from the empty arenas is when Stone Cold came back. Uh, he kicked Byron Saxton square in the nuts when he gave him a stunner, and I know he apologized to him online afterwards about it on Twitter. I think he tweeted and said, "I'm yeah." But he and like you watch it, he absolutely just kicks him square in the nuts. Everything else about the segment I kind of hated, um, but it was so funny.
I think the other thing I think I did quite like him with it is when that's one time when Triple H was on commentary on SmackDown, and he was actually amazing.
He
And there
was
was a bit when
incredible
like
on SmackDown.
someone interfered in the match. He was like, "They must have come in through the crowd. I didn't see them," and stuff like that. And it was just like he was brilliant on it. Like, and he was like, "I'm the only guy who can get demoted and end up doing more jobs." And things like that, and I thought he was brilliant. I'd happily take him on with Michael Cole as commentary. He was great.
Yeah, he was amazing, and I loved supposedly as well. It's supposed to just be a temporary thing. He was only supposed to be on commentary for a little bit of the show, and then they even said like, well, due to social media, like going absolutely nuts for Triple H on it, they kept him in for the whole show. He was amazing. Oh my, like I would love it if they put him on there for Mania.
Yeah, they've done a good job of playing on this whole empty crowd thing, but it's only so long I think they can keep it up.
Yeah, I like it for now, but I think at WrestleMania that needs to stop. Like they need to, if you're gonna make it that show that long with that many matches, you need to film it knowing there is no crowd and just get on with it. Like I don't want to see the pandering to the fake crowd and stuff like that. They need to just, you know, do it in a way that works for them. Um, I mean, we can talk a bit. I mean, before we got into WrestleMania, before we thought there's a lot to talk about there. Just a very brief update on some debuts that have happened on AEW. So obviously Matt Hardy has gone over, which was expected, um, uh, and he is in his broken character, so that's interesting. Brody Lee has
Vanguard
gone over
1
there as
returned.
well, who is Luke Harper. Oh yeah, Vanguard One did. That was. Have you seen Vanguard One and Chris Jericho?
It's amazing. It's like Chris Jericho can just sell anything, I'm pretty sure. But it was a weird promo with no crowd.
Yeah, it was, but I love the way, yeah, when he offered Vanguard One to join the inner circle as well, it was amazing. And also another big one as well was that Lance Archer has kind of been revealed that he was Jake the Snake's um, client. So those are three big names that have kind of joined. Matt Hardy's a weird one in terms of big names because I think his in ring stuff is towards, is declining his ability in ring, but he's still a big name to have. Whereas Lance Archer and Brody Lee are incredible, and it's two more incredible talents that are being added to an already absolutely stacked roster. So once if AW can navigate on the other side of all this coronavirus stuff, they're in such a good position. I urge so many people to watch. Like if you haven't watched Revolution, you should definitely watch Revolution because it's a fantastic pay per view.
Yeah, like, I think with them as well, they've kind of let Matt Hardy go back to being full broken Matt Hardy, because
Yeah,
he was kind of like the diet broken Matt Hardy on WWE, and he's actually said, Matt Hardy, he said, "If Triple H was in charge of the company, I would have stayed." Because obviously Triple H was a lot better with what he's done with NXT, see what he's done with NXT superstars and whatnot. He actually said on social media, he was like, "If Triple H was in charge of WWE, I would have stayed, but because he's not, and Vince is still Vince, that's why I've gone to AEW, and they can actually sort of let me be my thing." And it's a shame because he is a great talent. Like, and again, he's obviously got the broken gimmick is, I think, for the non wrestling fan, or the sort of like fair weather wrestling fan, it's awful. Not awful, it's like you would sit there and you're like, "What the fuck is this?" Like a fucking drone that flies around talking to people, and then this whole weird way, just I can't remember how he just like the Bucks of Youth or whatever it was he referred to them as and
yeah,
stuff
they're the
like that.
Bucks of
You are
Youth.
just sat there like, "What is this?" Like, but then to us, it's amazing. I think it's an absolutely ridiculous gimmick. It's so ridiculous that it's good.
And have you seen as well that they've changed? So since Matt Hardy has left, Jeff Hardy, the Twist of Fate is now called the Twist of Fury.
I didn't actually see that. No, I didn't realize they changed it, and they're changing the theme as well, aren't they? I think they're bringing it back as
Yeah, his old solo theme, the Time for Words has come and gone one or something
whatever
like
it's
that.
called. Yeah, that was a
But
good
yeah, they
theme though.
did.
Like, I've got no comments.
Oh, it was a good theme, and they did Jeff Hardy in this match against King Corbin on the. It was the Triple H episode of the SmackDown, the first one behind closed doors, and he hits it, and Michael Cole just keeps going, "The Twist of Fury. He's just hit the Twist of Fury. Oh, I can't believe he's just hit the Twist of Fury." I mean, like we get it, Cole. They've changed the name. Like, just shut up. Like,
Oh, they're
you've
terrible for
named your
that.
point.
They are so bad for that.
But now let's move on to WrestleMania itself. So all the stories indicate that WrestleMania has been filmed now, all of it. Some news that has come out of it from the recording. So supposedly the Miz. So originally, also on SmackDown last night, they announced it'll be Miz and Morrison versus the Usos versus the New Day in a triple threat ladder match. However, the Miz actually ended up going sick and into quarantine. So John Morrison is by himself in that match now. Um, so that's obviously one quite a big change. Asuka was rumored that was not cleared, but actually is, and supposedly she's had a women's tag match that they haven't announced yet. We imagine that will be against Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, but we you can never be sure.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
The big one though, the big one that you said earlier, Roman Reigns has pulled out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised, and it's obviously massive because this is one of the main events that they've been building towards. Um, you now look at, I mean, you bloody dropped the belt off the Fiend and gave it. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, but this was kind of the point people made when they made that decision with the Fiend. You could have had Cena and the Fiend be for the championship because then you have Cena's record championship on the line. Good versus evil, it would have worked. But instead, you wanted to put the championship match involving Roman Reigns fighting an old man, and it, it's unfortunate. It's come up to bite them on the ass a bit. Supposedly, Braun Strowman is stepping in.
Yeah, we were saying this earlier, and I think it's a weird one because, funnily enough, this would actually now be the best time ever to put the title on Braun Strowman because no one expects it. But I think a lot of these, and it's hard because obviously we've got our predictions coming for WrestleMania, and I think what sometimes might have been the logical prediction to go with, it might be completely different now because it will depend on when they can come back to normality. So I read, for example, slightly diverging to the SmackDown Women's Title match. Apparently, the plan was always to have Sasha Banks versus Bailey, but they couldn't have enough time to build that feud. And then now there's no crowd as well. They were like, it's kind of a feud which needs a big crowd, or the crowd need because the crowd is that's the main reason they wanted it to be a thing. Because loads of people in the WWE universe, I know you don't, but a lot of the fans do want to see that match again. Um, but as a result, you think, how is that going to affect that match? Because logically, in the normal situation, you'd assume one of those two would win, and then it would set up the feud to go into maybe SummerSlam or something like that. But if they're looking at not having anything for months and months and months, you're sort of like, it'd be a bit weird if you had someone they say Sasha Banks win, and then like for 2 months nothing happens, and then Bailey comes back. Like, I'm still pissed, and then they have a feud. You'd be a bit like, okay, um, and I think that's going to affect a lot of result. And I think this one as well, because I think obviously now are they still is the goal to still have Goldberg Roman Reigns somewhere down the line at another pay per view instead? Are they kind of have they only got Goldberg for a limited amount of time, and then they'll give it to Braun Strowman because I bet he does actually deserve a world title or what? I'm not really too sure.
Yeah, it's a weird thing for it because in terms of, as you said, like Goldberg's probably before all this happened was booked for one more appearance. And I'm sure he'll do Saudi shows and stuff down the line, but for now they'd be like, "We'll book you for one more show. It'll be for WrestleMania. You'll lose the belt to Roman Reigns." Now that hasn't happened. Do you go with Strowman? The downside to that being when Strowman eventually wins his first world title, the crowd will love it. Um, and it's a bit strange. You've just had him in the last pay per view drop the Intercontinental Championship to Sami Zayn to then go on and win the World Championship at WrestleMania against Goldberg. But yeah, Goldberg might not have any dates set. It's as you say, it's the perfect time in the sense of no one's expecting it. But in an empty arena, I actually at the minute can't call that match.
It's
And yeah,
interesting,
as you
yeah, because
said, like there's a lot of different things where I look at it like, well, actually, are they going to go? The empty crowd does make a difference.
and the other thing as well, I think like the other thing they have with so they did it with the when Zack Ryder won the Intercontinental title. I mean, obviously it's a different level, as you alluded to, the Intercontinental title and the World title. But he was never ever supposed to be in that match, in that ladder match. And then they were kind of just sat there like, well, he was never supposed to be in this match, therefore everyone will write him off. Just for the element of surprise, why don't we just have him win it? And then obviously lost
Yeah,
it the following night. But equally he still went and won it, and it was but yeah, we'll see what happens. It's intriguing times.
yeah, it's definitely, and yeah, there's loads of matches where you just look at it like, well, what way will they go? Because with no crowd and with what might be a hiatus afterwards, Yeah, it could change everything really. Um, One other change that we said was Dana Brooke has now been pulled because she's gone into quarantine, so they've changed the women's match to a fatal five way. Uh, but you kind of mentioned this that kind of works better for them.
Yeah, because it's I think that, and also because everyone just said when it was first announced as a six-pack challenge, everyone was just sort of sat there like, "Why don't you just do this in the Elimination Chamber?" And you could have had Naomi or Sasha Banks or whoever win it, and then you've got your WrestleMania match there and then. Um, so in a way, it kind of not to obviously wish ill on Dana Brooke, but it's kind of worked out in that sense. But yeah, it's weirdly, again, it's a bit of a weird one because you don't really know how it's going to go because again, lot you would have originally, if it was in a normal world, you would have been like, oh, presumably this is the moment where Sasha Banks will win it, and then that makes her and Bailey feud with each other, and then you've got like months and months of matches. But again, now you haven't got that. It's just a bit weird. Like you don't really know where it's going to go. I mean, it's probably the safe option is going to be one of those two. But equally, they could just give it to Naomi or someone for the sake of just giving it to Naomi or someone, and then they've got a complete and utter clean slate after Mania now. They can do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, they might do. And another sort of weird thing that happened was Styles and Taker has been uh, announced as a boneyard match.
Yeah, so no one knows what a boneyard match is. Apparently, you have some intel.
AJ Styles went on his he went on a stream on Friday, so yesterday, um, and gave some details about it. He said, um, so it takes place in a graveyard, and there is going to be a grave. So effectively, it's going to kind of be like a buried alive match, I think. But they had to be careful because they didn't want to call it anything that could be insensitive with what's going on at the minute around the world. So they didn't want to mention cemeteries or graves or being buried, but that's what it is. So it's a buried alive match, but they can't. They didn't want to call it that because of the deaths, obviously for the coronavirus, which is weird. But another interesting thing that I read, and it was a complete rumor, and I can't remember who reported it, but Undertaker's next run in the company will probably end up being his final run, and he might debut a different character for it.
Debut a different character, so it's not even going to be the
Or
American
I
Badass.
mean, it could be that he goes back to being American Badass, or it could just be he kind of just is himself as himself, like he's Mark Galloway. But it, that would, if that rumor is true, it might lead to the fact that AJ Styles then buries this Undertaker, and therefore a new Undertaker comes out. It would kind of all fit together.
I've seen a lot of early predictions for WrestleMania do have Styles winning it, because also for the classic WWE storyline reasons that you always get of the amount of time, and you see it so many times, the amount of times you'll have a build up to a match, and in like the weeks before the match, you'll have one guy constantly get the win over the other one, or constantly like get a one over on the other opponent, and then the opponent will eventually get their moment at the event, and that's when they win. And like we even said this with like Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker in the end. We were like, we should have seen this coming because in all the weeks leading up to WrestleMania, it was just Undertaker would sneak up on Brock Lesnar and beat him up. And then on the actual night, Brock Lesnar beats him. So a lot of people have said, based on Vince's traditional wrestling booking, that could allude to AJ Styles winning. So obviously, Undertaker cost him the trophy, cost him that match against Aleister Black, and Styles hasn't really had a chance to get one on the Undertaker yet. So possibly, I've seen a lot. It would make obviously this year is a Survivor Series as well. It's what's yeah, it's what 30 years since he debuted or something like that. Survivor Series. So that makes sense that that would be where his last match would be if it is his last match. In the nicest way possible, we kind of hope it's getting towards that time because he is just getting older now. Um,
Yeah, he's definitely not able to do what he used to.
And I think they've years and years ago when, so obviously when he was doing his hip replacement, wasn't it with Roman Reigns? He had that after that match.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
there were loads of rumors that he was gonna do that match as the American Badass because that was more to him as a person, as his sort of real life persona. And he was there like, "If it's gonna be my last match, I'd rather do it as myself." So you might see it. I think it'd be awesome to see. And yeah, as you said, it kind of fits quite well. Styles sort of burying the Undertaker, and you can see it now. There'll be some really, possibly even against Styles again at Survivor Series. There'll be some weird moment where like Styles will go on like a championship run or something like that, and then you'll be like, "Whoa, no one's beating me," her. And then there'll be like some really cheesy shot of a graveyard, and the Undertaker will just like come out of the grave or something like that. You can see it all now, like.
Oh yeah, 100%. It works for a long-term angle.
Yeah, like the coat with Cena and the coat and the hat in the middle of the ring, and it disappeared, and the Undertaker just emerged on the stage and stuff. Like they'll think of some overly theatrical moment to kind of justify it.
Oh yeah, and I would urge anyone as well if they haven't seen it already. On the network, they have the Stone Cold's Broken Skull sessions, and he has one with the Undertaker, and it is such an interesting watch. Uh, the stories they have are great. He also does one with Kane that I've seen. That's also really good. So that's something to go and look at. But yeah, again, it's just one of those things where I don't know what to expect. Our predictions. So we've said we're going to wait until after Raw for our predictions, just to be sure, because obviously a lot of things are changing currently, and we need to kind of work out what the actual card is going to be. But um, our predictions are going to be completely. I mean, I have no idea for most of the matches.
I
I
have
really don't.
there's a couple there's I have a couple of interesting potential swerve predictions for this, but in a way, like I'm actually really excited for this WrestleMania more than I thought I would be because the actual caliber of matches is really, really good, and there is that massive air of I have no idea what they're gonna do now because of like with Goldberg and Strowman, I genuinely don't know what they're gonna do, and it was like when we had the Fiends Goldberg match, and ultimately it ended on the way no one wanted it to end, apart from maybe a couple of people in Saudi Arabia, but even then, most of them were booing. Um, like there's this element of you just don't know what's going to happen, and that makes it because normally it's kind of obvious with a lot of matches, and you get the odd one every now and then when you're like, oh, that's a surprising result. But on the whole, you normally get. I mean, when we do our predictions, we normally there's probably one or two we disagree on, maybe if that in a whole card. But this time, I'm looking at like, at least quarter to half of the matches. I'm like, I don't know, I can't call it. Like.
Well, it's the thing for me. It's a bit of a shame. Is if nothing was going on in the world and this was going to be a normal WrestleMania, looking at the card. I mean, you have so Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins should be an incredible match because they're both brilliant wrestlers. Um, Otis versus Dolph Ziggler has got the comic relief all over it. It's going to be great, heartwarming. Cena and the Fiend would be great. Orton and Edge, great. Daniel Bryan versus Sami Zayn would probably could be a match of the year contender. You've got if there was a triangle ladder match. We were saying on an earlier podcast the current situation with Miz and Morrison, New Day, and the Usos could be the next iteration of the TLC matches between Edge and Christian, Dudleys and Hardys. They did that. They've made it a triangle ladder match. So that was a really strong match. Undertaker Styles is going to be a strong match. Baszler Lynch, Ripley Flair. Like, it's a stacked card. In terms of the matches, this is a very good stacked WrestleMania. I'm just
Yeah,
gutted
definitely. Like,
that I think it's going to be made worse because of the empty arena, but it is good. There is some really good matches there, but then, as you said, I can't call it. Sometimes on WrestleMania, for example, there'll be a feud where the bad guy wins at WrestleMania, like the heel will win, but then they'll have a match at Backlash and the face will win the overall feud, but they lose the battle at
but
Mania. But
and there's that
there might
stat,
not be
isn't
a
there?
Backlash.
There's a stat about Royal Rumble winners. Where was it? I can't remember exactly how many there were. We mentioned we went to go see the Royal Rumble. Is it something like four? Is it something like four in the last 15 years or
For
something? Have actually
they've won.
won. That's it. Like it's generally speaking, you don't. It doesn't happen that often, and it's weird because you think, oh, like they won the Royal Rumble. This is the start of their mega push, and it doesn't always happen. Like
Oh no,
obviously the women's one, it's what 50-50, isn't it? Of who's of title wins, but. Yeah, no,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of good though because they went through a phase of it being every year. So, like, if you look at it, there was a time where you had, like Austin
you know,
won.
yeah.
Austin won it. What 2001 went on to win it. Um, God, who was after that? Triple H,
Yeah, and then you
and then
won
he
at
went on and won
18,
it.
yeah.
Brock
Brock
Lesnar won the
Lesnar,
Rumble, then went on
yeah.
to win it. You've had Batista won the Rumble, went on to win it. Cena won the Rumble, went on to win. Like they, there was a good trend of several years in a row where the winner then it was almost default the winner was going to go on and win. So it's quite nice they've done the opposite of that recently. Um, but yeah, I think that kind of nicely sums up the situation at the minute, which is basically just uncertainty
I do have one
surrounding
question for you
what's
though
going on.
about WrestleMania.
Oh,
So,
okay.
generally speaking, the host of WrestleMania is involved in one thing to do on the card. So you had like the New Day introduce the Hardy Boys or reintroduce the Hardy Boys. You had The Rock, obviously, with the John Cena thing. What, if anything, do you think will be Gronkowski's contribution to either night of WrestleMania?
I mean, if I had to guess, he's going to have to get involved in Elias and Corbin because he's the one who asked for that match. So I imagine that would be his
I think it's
contribution.
not going to be a last minute introduction of Mojo Rawley to the world title match with Goldberg. That's what you want.
Could you imagine? That would
It'd
be
be there's no crowd to
literally the
hate on it
worst
though.
thing.
That's the thing. Like they could do that, and the
There's
commentators could be like, "Oh my god, it's Mojo Rawley."
there is no crowd, but there is still Twitter, and
They
that
don't
would
listen to Twitter.
erupt.
They don't listen to Twitter. You've
They will.
seen
They'll
it.
have no choice though. That's that. But that's the other thing on these empty shows because there isn't a crowd to gauge off. They probably will. We have to be like, well, how do we know if what we're doing is going down well or not? They'll look on Twitter. Um, but as I kind of said at the beginning of the show, we've got a plan to record a whole bunch of specials that include like lists and silly little games we've made up that we will try and stockpile as many of them as possible to release content throughout this time. So if you are stuck at home, give them a listen. They should be fun. Um, we've got our predictions will come out next week. We just want to wait till Raw to get out of the way. So we will still keep going during this time. I'm in self isolation anyway. I've not got much better things to do. But and you're obviously isolating as well now, kind of in the sense that the whole country is. So yeah, crazy times.
But I need to watch
If you
wrestling
want,
and talk about wrestling, but at perfect time.
yeah, perfect use of the time there. If you want to get in touch with us at all, we're on Twitter at uselessagpod, and individually, I'm available at Citadel James.
And I'm available at Henry Rogers 94.
And obviously, feel free to subscribe to this, share it, tell people about it. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we put them up on YouTube. I've paused my power rankings for the time being on YouTube because it's just too awkward in these empty shows. So that's on hiatus for the time being. Um, but we'll get some other content up there at some point. Uh, but yeah, thank you for listening and keep listening in the future to the Useless Aggression podcast.